All right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another future-focused weekly update. I am Christopher Lind, your host, and I will be navigating the intersection of business, technology, and human experience, hopefully with the goal, the stated goal at least, of keeping you 10 steps ahead and feeling comfortable, more comfortable at least, with all the chaos it is that we are dealing with in this very, very strange world we're living in. So hopefully you find it helpful. First of all, thanks to everybody who watches and shares things and all this other stuff. I appreciate it greatly. Actually, one of the things this week was inspired by a conversation I had with someone about something they shared, and we ended up talking about it. So you're going to hear it. It's the one I'm kicking off today with. So it'll be fun. It'll be a fun conversation. In true social media fashion, it's my responsibility to ask you to please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I don't know, wherever you're consuming this, do those things that you do if you find this helpful, and tell somebody about it. It always helps me out and hopefully helps folks out because I do this for you. I really do. So let's get into it. I've got my 4 usual topics that I'm going to break down what I'm talking about, and then go into a little bit of greater detail about them. There is a relatively high focus today on AI, but I've got a leadership one that I think is really, really important that I want to dig into. But first, let's start with this one that sparked from a subscriber of mine who reached out and said, "Hey, Christopher, have you seen this thing? Would love your take on it. How are you responding, or how do you feel about this?" And if you haven't seen it before, I'd encourage you to check it out. It's ai-2027.com/race. Okay. And I think you can just go to ai-2027.com and you'll get there. But anyway, it's this 2027 project put together by a bunch of really brilliant people in the AI space. They come from OpenAI and a lot of these big companies. They're very deep experts in the field. Okay. So they know this stuff inside and out and are actually involved with some of this stuff. And so they kind of put together their projections on what is a story. And this is what I love about what they did. They actually kind of told the story, not kind of, they did. They wrote out basically a narrative, a story of what could it look like if we were to, see things play out the way we're seeing things in our head based on our vantage point. Now, one of the things I really, really appreciated about it is that if you actually look at it, you got to dig into it, but they're clear that they're like, look, we're not saying we even agree with what we're putting out here. We're also not saying this is for sure how it's going to be. So I'm going to reiterate those 2 things because I don't want anybody listening or watching or whatever consuming this and then going, Christopher said, or Christopher said, they said. And I'm like, that's not what I said. They really did do a good job of saying, listen, this is just our best guess of what we're seeing will happen, not what we'd like to happen, not how we absolutely think 100% sure it will happen, but what we're seeing are some very viable probabilities based on where the tech is. Let me just tell you, it's very long, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. And it also is not something I would advise you to read before bed. Okay, so there's my adult advisory or explicit advisory warning. Be careful when and how you consume this thing because it's intense to say the least. Now, some of the things that it did, and it has this really cool in the top, at some point when it's not just me or I have some more capability, I'll maybe do more with the video so you can see what I'm seeing and how I'm thinking. But for now, you're just gonna have to let me explain via words. But on the top, what is that, right corner? It's got this animated chart. They did a really good job with this report. And as the story unfolds, as you scroll through the story, and there's kind of some blowouts that you can kind of see like, wait, what is that? Which they did a good job of help breaking it down for people who may not understand some of this terminology. Or, when you hear iterated distillation and amplification and IDA, and you're like, what? There's a little flip down that explains what it is. So they did a good job with it. But then they also did this animated thing that just shows the trajectory of where things are going. And they also broke down some of the key risks and things that they see happening in, as we move forward. And so there's 6 AI capabilities they're really watching and really concerned about: hacking, coding, politics, bioweapons, robotics, and forecasting. So I'm not going to sit and define all those for you. You can look at the report if you want to actually see it. But then it also kind of animates like, hey, where are we going to start to see emphasis in this? What's the growth trajectory on some of this stuff? How many actual AI agents and how advanced are they going to be? So, as we look in like the early years, it's kind of where we are now, where it's like, well, it's kind of smarter than humans, but not necessarily all that smarter. It's maybe 12 times faster than a person. And then you start to see the orders of magnitude jump up as you scroll down and you start to see, whoa. Some of the things that stood out to me on this, I actually liked the 6 categories that they picked. And I think they're things that we should all be watching for. Now, the one warning, well, I've given you lots of warnings on this. It can be very easy to read this and feel very helpless. And so I do want to speak to that and say, look, if you're somebody who sees stuff like this and just almost kind of hits a panic mode because you're like, I don't even know what to do with all this, then don't. Because again, I really want to reinforce, and this is kind of a key takeaway from it, please do not look at this kind of stuff and see this as a narrative of where we're going. It could be. It also might not. Some of the research, and some of it I'll talk about later, some of the research coming out makes me really go, I don't think it's going to play anything like this, because of how these very advanced models suddenly are starting to malfunction on a level that we're like, I thought these things were supposed to be getting smarter. They're getting smarter. And so every time we see it go up in one area, it's like it breaks cataclysmically in others. And so some of this, it's just going to be this continual exponential growth trajectory up. Could it happen? Sure. Does our risk of not thinking ahead, not considering risks, not critically evaluating what's 10 steps ahead, could that lead us to make some of these mistakes at a catastrophic level? I mean, yes. Do I think we're going to see some of the catastrophic things that happen in here play out? I absolutely do. So if you were to ask me, Christopher, so are you saying, this is all just junk science? And that's why I say you should pay attention to it. You should pay attention to it and have your eyes wide open to watching for some of this stuff. Because if you were to say, Christopher, so do you just think just throw this all out? It's all junk anyway. It's not accurate. It's junk science. It's a bunch of propaganda to scare people. And no, there are some very legitimate things that these very intelligent people who are right in the heart of this stuff, that I can say from firsthand experience, I've seen some of these things where I go, yeah, they're not wrong. Like, this is not exaggerated. The potential of what they're talking about is very much real. And I mean, I think one of the things you see in it is that, like, we don't even really get to reliable agency until about 2026. Now, again, to me, I think, good grief, every week it's changing. A year out from now, that's a lot of gaps to close. Okay. So if you look at the trajectory of this stuff start to exponentially jump up, you see us getting to reliable agent starts to increase things. So what should you take from that? Well, we should be paying attention to agents. Everybody said 2025 was going to be the year of agents. I think it's the year of experimenting with agents. I think people are playing around with this stuff. They're experimenting with, does it do what we think it can do? Does it work the way we think it should? Maybe not. And, we'll see how that works. And, then we'll go from there. But there's a lot of unknowns right now. And so, but we should be watching agents, and we should be watching to see how they go. And do they improve? Do they get worse? Because what I do agree with the report is what happens with agents has a significant impact on the trajectory. And if we can't even get these agents to not malfunction the way we do, that line's going to stay pretty flat for a while. Okay. Regardless of whether we say, well, they're PhD agents. Yeah. Well, they're PhD agents that can't seem to really do anything. Okay. It doesn't really matter. It's going to stay relatively flat. Now, when I say flat, I don't mean that the AI capabilities won't continue to increase. So if you look at the chart and you see like hacking and coding and bioweapons and all this other stuff start to move up, it doesn't mean that those just stagnate. Because even where AI is today, those things are already growing. It just means they're going to grow at a more controlled rate. And so I think we absolutely should be watching the agents. We should be watching how we're making decisions about where they get used and how much autonomy we give to them. Because to me, that's another element of, well, okay, so maybe we get to reliable agents, but are we handing things over to those reliable agents that we shouldn't? Or shouldn't, I get kind of allergic to that, but like, how much do we actually start delegating? Well, humans are pretty resistant to change. So we get a little nervous when it starts coming to handing things over. So maybe that slows things down, but we should be watching that. How are agents advancing? How comfortable are we with handing things over? How much do we kind of resist against that? Now, one of the things that I thought was interesting in this was their robotics category was very, very slow until we started getting into like the 2027s, and then it exploded. I actually don't know that that's the most accurate. And again, the people who are largely involved in this were more on the software development side, from what I could tell. They were not on the manufacturing, the hardware, the engineering side of robotics. With what I'm seeing in robotics, I fully anticipate we're going to see that accelerate at a much faster pace. So that was one of the things that I looked at that I went, I think that one could go up. Politics was also slower. I don't agree with that one bit. I think politics and AI is going to become a big, big thing. Now, maybe they're not going to want everybody recognizing that AI and politics is as close together and increasing things as much as, it'd be nice to just make people know we're the people. We don't have machines make decisions for us. So I think it's going to be harder to see that one. There's not going to be as much transparency around it. But like I said, I think we need to be watching agents, how they're advancing, how much we're willing to toss over to them. I think we need to be watching robotics very closely. Now, another big inflection point is when it really starts to become super effective at coding. Now, they project that at like 2027. Again, this is where if you talk to software engineers, their leadership might say AI is the best at coding. If you talk to real software engineers, they have a very different story. They're not quite as like, it's a superhero, which I think is true not just with coding, but with everybody I talk to. Seasoned professionals who are experts in their field. If you talk to somebody who doesn't know anything about a field, they'll say AI is beating people at it. You talk to somebody who's a professional in that field and they'll go, not even close. Now, some of that is just a personal bias to believe AI can't do what I can do. But legitimately, if you're an expert in your field, you recognize the vulnerabilities and flaws in AIs that people who don't know it don't understand. Now, again, I've said many times before, whether it can do it or whether it can convince people to believe it can do it, those are two very different things. And that's another thing I'm watching. How much do people start to believe that AI could become a superhuman coder, a superhuman this, a superhuman CEO, a superhuman, right? That's to be seen. Now, we need to keep an eye on that. They're saying, well, their coder's not even going to be till 2027. Depending on where thing goes, that could change significantly. Now, where you really see things explode is when we get to a point where, it really starts to pick up once we get to superhuman researcher. Now, I know last week I talked about AI claiming to be a PhD of intelligence that can do autonomous research. Go read the headlines. I'm telling you, we're already finding out it doesn't do that. So we're nowhere near there. They're predicting that out in the 2027 range. I think that's probably a more accurate prediction. But even that, research on what? What is it going to be doing? How accurate? Can we clean up its accuracy rate, its hallucination rate? I don't know, but we should be watching. Well, when can it start autonomously doing its own research? Because once it can do that, then it can start to fuel things much faster, and you'll see the curve pick up. To be seen. I think the next one is a superhuman remote worker. That's where you really start to see, because research is great. If we can get AI doing research or helping with research, it increases things, but then you still have just the but it's got to get done. Well, if AI can actually start to become a worker, an actual employee, autonomous, as you can imagine, now the pace starts to pick up because the research can translate to work. It can translate faster. And then one of the final milestones is once, what happens when AI can actually do AI research. It can actually start to self-improve. Now, this is where we start getting into territory of should we even go there? But if you look at the chart, once it hits that, that's where it just goes off the chart. Now, I hope by this point you've seen how I'm saying we don't know the answers to any of these questions. And that's where if you read this, cool, fine. You like science fiction, you like scaring yourself, sure. If you want to think that by 2030, there's going to be 5 billion highly super intelligent, 1,000x human speed, capability agents running around and lose sleep, fine, read the report and think that. But I think the clear indicators that we should be watching are this, okay, when can it start to become an agent? When can it start to do things autonomous, like coding, faster and better than people? When can it start to do research well? When can it start to do work without a human behind it? Right. And it just goes from there. When can it start doing research on itself? I think those are the kinds of things that we should be watching. But like I said, it's an interesting thought experiment. I hope that at least brings some calm to it, that, yeah, it's scary. And the person who reached out to me was a little freaked out by it. And they're like, Christopher, do you agree with this? I'm like, that's like watching Black Mirror and going, do you agree with it? I'm like, I mean, it's science fiction. So yes, I think it's possible. I think we're going to experience some of the really horrific and tragic things in here. I think one of the things that's missing, and then I'll end on this because this is longer than I normally go on these, is what a lot of this stuff misses. And this is the part that I want to end on a really positive note. Most of this stuff never talks about the positive side. We're always focused on the negative. It's going to hack. It's going to take over politics. We're going to use it to develop bioweapons and, eliminate human jobs. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it could, but it's also going to cure diseases. It's going to, improve people's lives. It's going to, do these other things. And yes, are there inherent risks we need to watch out for? Absolutely. Absolutely. But let's not get so lost in the fear mongering of all the horrible things it could do that we at least don't represent the fact that, it's also going to do some pretty killer stuff. It's also going to be able to do some pretty amazing things. And let's not forget that, because that's super exciting too. And I think that helps balance the scales of, are some of these things going to happen? Yeah, but I don't see, eliminating cancer on the list. Where's that? Giving people who are paralyzed with spine or brain injuries, repairing that, where's that on the list? It's not, even though that is very much a viable thing that we could see in 2026, 2027. Why is that not there? Well, that doesn't trend well, right? That doesn't feed this idea that, the end of the world is near. And so hopefully that helps balance things out a bit. All right, let's transition over to number 2. Let's take a break from AI, breathe out, take a deep breath, relax. All right, we're going to take a break. Not necessarily to sing into sunshine and puppies territory. I'll just warn you that this isn't necessarily like, yay, here's some wonderful happy news, but I will balance it with this. I will balance it with some of how to interpret it. So DDI, one of the biggest leadership, I don't even remember what it stands for. So anyway, I think most people are familiar with DDI if you've ever been to a leadership class or whatever. But they released their global leadership forecast. I talked about this on LinkedIn yesterday. I'll probably be talking about it more in some other things. I actually did a keynote today where I brought in some of the elements of this. Whenever I talk about research, I always get a little nervous because research is always influenced, and you got to be careful how you interpret it. But this is a good one. This really is a good one. Now, I'm not going to say, so whatever it says, believe. No. Never shortcut your critical thinking or anything like that. But it's a good one. And it's actually a really diverse one. So this isn't, maybe it's, maybe you could, I can't remember what slide is this, slide 2. It actually breaks down who did they survey, who did they interview. And it's really good. There's almost 11,000 leaders in 2,000 organizations from all over the world. Now, you could sit and split hairs over why only these countries and why not this? But it's not one where 90% is the US and Canada. It's nothing like that. There's a lot of Asian representation. There's a lot of African representation. There's a lot of Middle Eastern representation. So I appreciated that. The gender could be greater, but it's also pretty good. They have a balance. It's not all a bunch of white dudes type of a thing. So they did a great, it's across a bunch of different industries. So it's the kind of research I go, yeah, you could nitpick, you could have done better, but it's also pretty darn good. It's pretty darn good. So I commend them on that. So DDI, I posted about this. You engaged with me and sent me a message. Well done if you listen to this. I thought it was really good. Here were some of the things that I think so the big one, if you get to one of the first, this is what my post was about today. I think I talked about this, or yesterday, if you're listening to this on Friday, is the fact that one of the biggest crisis moments right now, and this to me is really scary, trust in somebody's manager in the last 2 years has dropped 17 points. Yeah, 17 points. Okay. So in 2022, it was 46% of people trusted their manager. Half. To me, still way too low, but half. Now, it's less than a third. And just to put this in context, trust in senior leadership, which usually is pretty static, usually sits around a third. 32, 33%. They said 32 in 2022. Pretty consistent with data and research I'm involved in. And again, would I love to see those numbers higher? Of course. Do I think they can be? Yes. Do I coach and work with a lot of executives that can actually bump that way, way up? Absolutely, you can. So I'm not saying that's good, but I also understand where there's often skepticism and a lack of trust in senior leadership. When you have that kind of disconnect, and just knowing what I know about human tendencies, which is when things don't go how we think they should, we tend to think negatively of it. People who seem very different than us, we seem to think negatively. So there is, and I'm empathetic to this, that there's a lot of senior leader hate out there. Don't take that and say, Christopher, well, what about this? What about this? And what about, look, there's plenty of them that have set plenty of bad examples that I get where it comes from. I also know a lot of really great senior leaders who care deeply about their people and their organizations that get dumped on a lot, and they don't deserve it. So I guess my one recommendation is, if you're listening to this and you tend to have that senior leaders are the problem, just be careful. I mean, one, you're listening to me. I have been one. I was one. I work with them a lot. I mean, I see it. So just be careful of that. But I also understand why it's typically lower, is my main point. I understand why it's lower normally. I get it. When your direct manager drops below your trust in the senior most executives in a company as a global trend, that's bad. Okay. That is really, really bad when globally people trust the executive team more than the person that oversees their day-to-day work, the person they talk to on a consistent basis, the person who's supposed to be there to support their development, their growth, who's supposed to care about them, the person they talk about at dinner. 7 out of 10 don't trust them. That's a problem. And that's a problem, not just like, oh, well, people don't trust. Like I have said now for multiple years, we are moving into the age of distrust, and we are going to have to work so much harder to build and maintain trust. And we're going to have to fight against some of this being inauthentic, hiding behind smoke and mirrors, not talking about problems, not seeking help. Like we've got to fight against this because people's trust levels are just dropping. And this one to me was like, oh, good freaking grief. This is not going to end well. Now, is this a Christopher doom and gloom? It's the end of the world. No, these kinds of things, we always somehow hit a floor and then we bounce back. The part that I just hate looking at that is I'm like, I really don't like that this floor is like 3 feet, floors underground. Like how many more basements are we going to build before we finally go, hey, you know what? We should probably really, really work on managers building trust. And to be crystal clear, I'm not dogging on managers. I am not yelling at managers and going, managers, be better, do more, whatever. Like, they get a lot of that. And yes, I will. Okay, I'm not going to say I'm not going to do that. Managers, to be fair, if you don't care about your people, if you don't care that they don't trust you, if you hear me saying they don't trust their managers and you go, well, that's not my problem, you are the problem. You are the problem if that is your response to this. If you see this kind of data and go, well, not my problem, you are the problem. And so, but I know I know lots of frontline managers who are just tired and they're burned out and they're doing the best they can and they're getting unreasonable expectations from their bosses and they're trying to keep their teams alive and and they're trying to fight for budget and dollars and to try and fight to not have to riff out their teams. And I empathize with where they are right now. And so this really is a clarion call, I guess, if you want to use the term, I don't know, whatever. I did a post this week where I made an image of me kind of like William Wallace being like, we gotta be warriors here. And to me, when I came across this report, I was like, you want a warrior cry right now for leaders for executives to say, we need to build our leaders. Because one of the other things in this report, I looked at it and I'm like, so there's two things I want to focus on with this that also tie to this. One of the other ones is, this is the inverse, okay? 7 in 10 people don't trust their direct manager. Major problem. Guess what about the managers? 7 in 10 of them have experienced extreme increases in their stress levels. I wonder if that's connected. The managers are overwhelmed, burned out, they're considering leaving, and what do you know? Their teams are trusting them less. Why? Because they have less gas in the tank to be able to be there for their teams. They're being penalized, and the incentives aren't there for them to focus on building trust and doing the kinds of things for that. That is a problem. And that's why I say, yes, managers, fight harder, don't give up, do more. But also organizations, these people are critical to the fabric of your success. And if you ignore them, if you don't pay attention to them, your organization is going to collapse in on itself. You've got to take things off their plate. You've got to free up time for them. You can't just say, do more with less. You can't. They're already at a cataclysmic point. It's already bad. Now, here's the other thing, okay? And this isn't me just saying training's the problem. No, training's not just the problem. But here's the thing, okay? Some of the biggest skill gaps right now that would fight for trust, like managing change. How do you manage change? Well, we'd like to say, oh, well, we all experience change, so we should be good at managing it. No, we're not, actually. That's like just assuming people are great communicators because they talk a lot. Nope. I know lots of people who say lots of words that are garbage communicators. Same thing with managing change. Same thing with setting strategy. 4 of the top skills that can lead to trust: setting strategy, managing change, identifying and developing future talents, and decision-making and prioritization. Guess what? Those happen to be the skills that managers get the least support on from a training, development, and growth. How are these pieces fitting together? We have managers who keep being told to do more with less. They're burning out. They're stressed out. The skills they need to build trust with their people, like setting strong strategies that connect the work to the actual organizational goals, managing through the chaos and change that literally is a daily lap pool that everybody's swimming in, identifying and developing the skills in their people. That takes time, by the way. That's not just a skill, that's time. Taking the time to get to know your folks, understanding what makes them tick, what makes them excited, what are they good at, what are they not good at, figuring out what things you can do. How does that tie to your strategy? That's a skill, and it requires time and resources. Oh, what do you know? One of the biggest gaps right there, not happening. Decision-making and prioritization, you keep saying do more. Well, you can't just do that. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much you can do. So at some point, stuff's got to go. And if you don't have leaders that go, well, let's see, I got 10 new requests today, and we've already got 47, and we just lost half our team. If you don't equip those people to go, all right, so some of these things are going to have to bump. Some of these timelines are going to have to move. Which ones? Let's pick the right ones. Let's figure out what can move off our plate. Let me make sure I know how to manage through that change, because I can't just rip the rug out from under people and go, you're not working on that project anymore. You're working on this. There's a way you got to do this. You also got to be able to communicate that back to leaders and work with them. I mean, all of this stuff is intertwined. And so while I looked at this report and went, okay, yeah, there's all these separate silos in these buckets that you can look at and go, well, that's really bad, or that's really bad, or, oh, this is bad. Yes. And they're interconnected. And we actually can improve these things in ways that actually work together, that lift the tide for everybody. So here's a couple key things that I'm going to encourage people at all levels. All right, and then I'll wrap this one up. One, if you're an employee, okay, if you're an employee, regardless of where you work or what your circumstances are, be a voice of encouragement to your boss and think positively. And if you get the opportunity, be a voice of encouragement to the folks at the senior levels. Now, that may sound like advice that's offensive, and I get it. You might go, my boss is awful. They're toxic. The leader at our company, the CEO, is incompetent. Okay, well, maybe that's true, but you can't control that. But you can control your response to it. And I can tell you right now, making them feel like you think they're incompetent, making them feel like they're an adversary to you, it's not helping them get any better, and it's not helping your situation. So if you can lean in, find the things that you can encourage them on, find the areas you go, hey, let me help. Maybe there's something I can do, and recognize they're dealing with a lot, and be empathetic wherever possible. I think you'd be surprised how powerful that can be. I can count the times when I've had a direct report come to me and go, Christopher, look, I know you're doing everything you can. And, I see this, and I just want to let you know that I see what you're doing, and it means a lot to me. And I see this area that I might be able to help. Is that okay if I help with that? Like, that has motivated me and helped me in ways that I don't think those individuals could even ever imagine. And even when I've been on my worst day, that has made me want to do a 180. So yeah, you might go, well, Christopher, I tried it. It didn't work. Okay, well, keep doing it. Keep doing it, because doing the opposite is actually only making your situation worse. So even if you're only going to do it out of selfish desires, do it for yourself. Do it for yourself to improve your environment. I'd encourage you to do it for their benefit. But even if you can't bring yourself to, then do it for yourself. And if you really can't, then leave. Move on to something else, because you're taking yourself, your boss, and your whole team down with you. And that is on you. That is on you. To the managers, like I said, don't give up. Don't give up. We are going to hit the bottom floor of this. We are going to hit the basement, and organizations are going to wake up to it. And I was in an advisory board meeting today where we were talking about it. And there's a lot of people who they're holding on to a lot of funds that they know they need to do things, but they're scared to pull the trigger. I know people who are, they know they need to make changes to the way things are done. They're scared right now. Like, we're going to hit a point where it's going to be like, well, there's no other path. So hang in there. Take some time if you need it. But then also, it's not as hard as you may think. I talk and coach a lot of managers who just feel like the list is never ending. The things I could do to improve are so much better. The expectations just feel crushing. And I see you, and I see that. But sometimes it's the little things that make a difference. Sometimes it's the taking the time to just sit with your team members and go, hey, like, acknowledge what's going on. Don't trash talk the company. Don't trash talk words, but just be like, you don't need to lie about it. You can say, yeah, this is a lot. I know it's really uncertain. How are you doing related to these? What are you nervous about? And instead of just saying, is there anything I can do to help? Get to know them, pay attention, and go, just like that person who I said did to me as their boss. Do that for your people. I'm observing this. I thought maybe I could do this to help. They might still, and I know sometimes we're like, I don't have any room on my plate to do more. I can't tell you how many times I've done it, and the people have gone, I don't need you to do that, but the fact you took the time to think about it and care, that made a huge difference. And that might move that trust score up just a little bit. And that might be the motivation they need to maybe be more encouraging to you, because you know what? Maybe you were the one. And so often we're caught in this, well, I'll do it when they do it. And we all stand sitting with our arms crossed, miserable, waiting for somebody else to fix it. Okay, well, be the manager that leans in. Be the one that asks. Be the one that says, yeah, I know. Maybe we find a way to make this project go away. Maybe we find a way to just knock it out and be done with it. Let's talk about this and build that trust. And I promise it's not as hard as you think. It'll take time. Yes. It'll take commitment. People are going to be skeptical. If you haven't been doing this and all of a sudden you show up, start asking, hey, how are you doing? Yeah. The bell in their head's going to go, why am I getting fired? Is this what this is about? So be prepared for that resistance. Address it head on. I know I haven't asked these questions, and I should have been. I'm sorry. I've been a little disoriented myself, and I've kind of lost sight of things. But I want to get better at this because you matter. The work you do matters. And I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to support you in that. First time they may go, no, I'm good. Okay. Well, we'll revisit that next week. And I'm just going to keep showing up that way. In the meetings we already have, it'll fit into your current infrastructure. I'm not asking you to go do something you've never done before. But you can do it. You can do it. You can up that trust score. No matter the circumstances you're in, no matter the insane company you're in, no matter how many direct reports you have or how stupid the expectations you have, you can be the person that your people trust. And if you don't care about that, you shouldn't be in a manager role. There's just no other way to put that. Okay, the last one is to the executive folks who I know are part of my audience. You have a responsibility to do all the things that I've just talked about. You don't get a pass because you sit in the C-suite. You don't get to sit off in your lush office or ride on your private jet and show up and make a fancy speech and then go back to it. And does that mean you need to spend every day on the front lines in, no. And actually that might be more offensive because you might send the wrong message to people and be like, we're paying you how much to do the job I'm doing? Like, get out of here. Go make strategic decisions for us. So don't make that mistake. Don't make the mistake of like, well, maybe if I just spend more time being out with the people doing their work. Because the thing is, you're not able to do that. And that's not what you're paid for. And that's actually not what people want you doing. If you're a manufacturing CEO, might some maybe, and do it strategically, I guess, but they don't want you see you every day on the shop floor telling people what to do. First, you're crimping their style. You don't know what you're talking about. And secondly, they're going, we're paying you how many millions of dollars to make strategic decisions to improve our jobs? You're not going to do that sitting here going, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? Thanks for teaching me that. When they know you're never going to do this again. So don't flip the script that way, but also don't isolate yourself off in your echo chamber and go, well, it's too far disconnected for me. And I'm just going to trust our people to take care of it. Listen, care, pay attention, show up better, put people over profits. And guess what? Your profits will go up too. That's the thing. I say this to so many senior executives. When you prioritize people, your profits go up alongside it. When you prioritize profits at the expense of your people, you may see any sort of increase you see in profits will quickly be overshadowed by the catastrophe and the loss in profits and the loss in operational expenses and the loss in everything else that you're going to experience. You're playing smoke and mirrors. You're the morning fog. You're not actually winning. And again, if you're someone who goes, who cares? Because I get to go home to my mansion and I have a golden parachute and my bonus still paid out. Get the heck out of the C-suite. get out. You don't belong there. You are the problem. Now, I know many of those people are not in those seats, and there are a lot of really great people in those seats. But if you're one of them, get out, because you are taking everybody down with you. Okay. Well, that was fun. I'm only 2 in. I'm not going to get to 4. So I'm just going to go to number 3. I'm adjusting left and right today because I've had technical issues in my keynote and all this other stuff. So I'm pivoting. So let me talk about one of the other ones that I had, that I think it's one that is good, that I just want us to be aware of. Okay. If you haven't seen some things, OpenAI's 4.1, and then of course, when one big model makes changes, then so does everybody else's. So the context windows exploded in size. And what that means is now these models can see more of your stuff. They can refer to past conversations. They can, know more about how you've worked. And it's all in this front of, we're trying to give you a more personalized AI experience. And that's not necessarily inherently a nefarious bad thing. Okay. I think personalization is great. I absolutely love the new releases. I love the fact that AI is much more helpful for me today than it was in 2022. And I'm continuing to learn how to use it better. Okay. I love that. And you need to be really careful with that. So I want to outline a few things just to be careful about, and just to be conscious of. This isn't designed to spook you or freak you out. It's more to say, hey, this is where we are. So here's some things to think about so that you can navigate it well, so you don't end up finding yourself lit on fire and burning the world around you. Because that's what I want to make sure nobody does to themselves. So is this good? Yes. Is it resulting in some really weird stuff? Yes. If you haven't noticed, maybe you haven't experienced this, it's a trending thing now. AI is suddenly referring to people by their name, and people are like, I never gave you my name. Like, how did you figure that out? It's bringing up details about them that they're like, whoa, hang on. My wife experienced this. She was using it for something, and all of a sudden it wrote a bio for her. It prompted her, and it was like, hey, would you like me to write a bio for your social page? And it did. And she's like, where did it get these details? Like, I never gave it this. And so I get, just so you know, if you're seeing that, don't freak out. Okay. Is it a little scary? Sure. Could you go down the rabbit trail of conspiracies? You could, but it's not going to be helpful, and there's nothing you can do about it anyway. All right. But realistically, what it's doing is you are much more of a bad poker player than you realize. There are hidden patterns and tells in everything you do. And AI is trained on every piece of human data that has ever been created, and is literally designed to identify patterns. It's designed to pick up on things and look at it on a global scale and go, oh, yeah, this. So is it any surprise that when the context window of this thing becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's consuming more and more stuff, and it's consuming more of you working with it, being trained on more and more human data, is it any surprise that it's going to spook you a little bit when it's like, hey, Christopher, and you're like, hey, Christopher, I never said I was Christopher. And you're like, well, but you keep asking these questions, and you keep talking about this thing, and your social media, you're doing this stuff, and I've seen this pattern, and I have access to the internet, and so I know who you are. And a good example, a lighter note example of this, okay? My kids and I love watching like YouTubers together, just some of the cheesy Minecraft, whatever. And one of them that we watch is Skeppy. And Skeppy played this game, and Dan TDM did it too recently, where there's these AI things where you can it'll ask you questions, or you'll put in words, and it'll start to piece things together. And then it'll say, is this who you were thinking about? Right. And it's really good at it. Like in a series of questions, it can be like, you're talking about this. And it seems like magic. And it's like, but it's not magic. It's just looking at patterns. And then it's just going, okay, well, there's a billion possibilities. And now I'm cutting that to 500,000, or 500 million. And now I'm cutting that to 1 million. Now I'm cutting it. And it just does it at such a scale that we go, this thing is magic. It's nefarious. It has access to the underworld and a new dimension. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It just sees things that are much bigger and broader than we can. And that doesn't mean it's smarter than us. It just has a bigger context window than we do. So, I mean, that's what's happening. But is that good? I don't think it's good or bad. I think it just is. And then it's a matter of what do we respond to regarding that. So some things to consider with this. I say this to my kids all the time. I tell people all the time. Anything you do on the internet or near an internet connected device is not a secret. Okay? It's not a secret. And I'm not saying that in a spooky big brother, like, oh, the government's watching. No, not in that sense. But when you think about all this data, it's going somewhere, it's being done with something, and AI is now able to look at something that no human on the planet ever has been able to before. Now, to me, this doesn't spook me because of my worldview, and I'm like, yeah, AI is a blundering idiot compared to God. But compared to humans, massively more capable in certain things. So with that, like, is it good? No. Should you be hyper aware? Probably more than ever that, like, yeah, you know, that thing you think is a secret, that thing you think people will never find out or it won't be tied back to you. It will. It could. It wouldn't actually be that hard to do anymore. So be above reproach. Don't do stuff on the internet that you shouldn't be doing. Don't do stuff in general you shouldn't be doing. Knock it off because it's going to catch up and burn you in the end. And now it just has even more probability to do it. And on top of it, I've talked about this in other updates before. It's not always good at how it mixes data together. There was that court reporter who suddenly found out that AI thought he had committed all the crimes that he wrote about. Be careful. As the context window expands, there's more opportunity for it to hallucinate and connect data points that shouldn't be connected. So, is that bad or good? Well, it could be a lot of things, but it just means you need to be that much more intentional. You need to be more careful about what you do. You need to show up more authentic and not do things that you don't want associated or affiliated with you. And that means everything down to like the crap you like or spend too long looking at in your news feed. Like, just don't. Just don't. Quit. Don't do it anymore. I think the other thing is be really careful because it's going to be so much easier to trust this thing, to trust that it understands you, trust that it has the same judgment you do. You know, if I ask it to do something, it's going to know what I would do because it's trained. It has these context windows. It's seen everything I've ever done and everything in the world, so it can make a better decision than I. No, it can't. No, it can't because it still isn't you. And it's still an alien intelligence. And the way it thinks, the way it makes decisions, the way it prioritizes is not you. And that's true of any other human being. Like, right? It's not you. So be careful that you don't trust it too much. I talked about it last week. Like, AI is eroding people's cognitive capabilities. Don't delegate things. Don't trust AI to think, do your thinking for you. Think, keep thinking. You need to. Okay? So is it good or bad? It's both. It just is. But there are some legitimate things that you should be doing, and you should be aware of this. And yeah, benefit from it. I love it. I love the fact that I can have as many conversations open as I need, and I can reference them back and forth. I've got to be much more critical in my lens of observation and editing and critical thinking, though, because there's times it's pulling things. I'm like, wait, that's not, no. That's not what I'm talking about. Well, you said that over here. Yeah, I know, but that was specific to this one instance for this very specific thing. That's not what I'm talking about. So you better elevate your skills. And this is where the real risk comes in, because if we go too far as its context windows, the risks accelerate is my point. So it just is, which means you just have to be that much more intentional about what you're doing, that much more thoughtful, that much more critical in the way you think about things. Not critical in a negative way, but just thinking deeply, thinking consciously, being aware. You have to. And if you don't, it will burn you, because this isn't going away and you can't run from it. And just to the folks who are like, well, I just won't use AI then. You already are. You already have. And you can't do that. And it already knows things about you. It already knows whatever. And that just is. You might go, well, I don't do it. Well, your Instacart driver does, and Instacart knows all this stuff. That Amazon order, it pegged what you're interested in and what your seasonal patterns are and what you buy and what sizes they are. And it can tell, well, how many kids do you have? And it can tell you search to say, like, it knows. You can't escape it. So accept it and then be intentional about what you do moving forward. Okay? All right. I hope you found that helpful. It's a little bit of a different flavor than usual, a little less points than I usually get to, but I hope you had a great week. I hope this is helpful in your thinking. And we will be back here next week. And